19. I was told to be a husband before I knew how to be kind. My name is Joseph Yoder, and I am 71 years old. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in early March, slipped between the seed catalog and the gas bill, addressed in handwriting I had not seen in 46 years. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing one plate, because one plate is all I use now. Rebecca has been gone 11 winters. The handwriting on that envelope belonged to her younger sister Miriam, who I was told had died of pneumonia the year before my wedding. I set the plate down. I did not dry my hands. I carried the letter to the table and sat with it unopened for almost an hour, watching the steam from my coffee disappear, the way I once watched my wife disappear from a room without ever leaving it. I should tell you that in the community where I grew up, near a bend of farmland that the English maps still call Willow Run, a boy was a boy until he was 19, and then he was expected to become a husband. There was no instruction. There was only the transition. My father, Eli Yoder, told me 3 days before my wedding, a man leads, a man provides, a man corrects. He said it the way another father might say, hold the reins firm but not cruel. He believed he was teaching me the whole of it. I believed him. I was 20 years old, and Rebecca Mast was 18, and I had spoken perhaps 40 sentences to her in my life before the bishop joined our hands. The letter from Miriam was 4 pages long. I will come back to it. First, I want to tell you about the morning after my wedding, because that morning is where I have been standing, in some part of myself, for 51 years. Rebecca had braided her hair before sleep, and in the dawn light I watched her unbraided at the small mirror my mother had given us. I remember thinking she looked frightened, and I remember thinking it was not my responsibility to ask why. My father had been clear. A man leads. I asked her instead if she knew how to bake the bread my mother baked, the heavy rye with caraway. She said yes. I said good. That was the whole of our first conversation as husband and wife. I did not ask if she had slept. I did not ask if she missed her own mother's house. I did not ask whether the night before had frightened her or only quieted her. I had been told what a husband was. I had not been told what a husband should feel. The kettle on my stove is whistling now, in this present kitchen, and I get up to take it off the burner. The letter is still on the table. I read it 3 times yesterday. I have not been able to read it a 4th. Back then, in our first year, Rebecca grew thinner. I noticed without noticing, the way you notice that a tree near the road has lost some branches without ever marking the day it happened. She did not complain. She did not weep where I could see her. She rose before me, and she went to bed after me, and the bread was on the table. My father came to supper one evening and looked at her and looked at me and said, "She keeps a fine house, Joseph." I felt proud. That is the word. Proud. Not of her exactly, of what I had been given. There is a difference, and it took me 40 years to learn it. The first warning, if I am honest, came from her mother. Sarah Mast was a small woman with a voice that never rose above the sound of a butter churn. She visited us in the 8th month of our marriage, and she stood with Rebecca at the window for a long time. And then she came to me at the barn door and said, "Joseph, my Rebecca is a quiet girl. Quiet girls need a softer hand than loud ones." I did not understand her. I thought she was telling me Rebecca was easy to manage. I nodded. I said I would remember. Sarah looked at me the way a person looks at a window that will not close in winter, and she went back inside. I never spoke to her again about her daughter. She died the following spring. Miriam's letter says that Sarah came home from that visit and wept for 2 days. I did not know that until yesterday. In the present, I pull on my coat and go out to feed the chickens, because the rhythm of small chores has always been the way I keep my hands from shaking. The hens come to my boots. They do not know that I am a man who is being told, very late, the shape of his own life. I scatter the feed. I look toward the small white stone at the edge of the orchard where Rebecca is buried, and I find that I cannot look at it for long anymore. It used to comfort me. Now it asks questions. The thing I want to be careful about in telling this is that I do not want to soften myself. I was not a violent man. I never raised my hand to Rebecca. In our district, the rule was that a husband disciplined with his presence, not his fists, and I followed that rule. But I see now that there are crueler instruments than a hand. Silence for one, withholding for another, the slow, even refusal to wonder what your wife is thinking. I had all of those, and I used them daily, the way another man uses tools, without ever calling them by their right names. The first child came in our second year, a boy. We named him Eli, for my father. Rebecca held him with both arms wrapped tight, like a woman holding a candle in a wind. I remember she looked at me over the baby's head, and she said, "Joseph, am I doing it right?" I told her, "He is fed. He is warm. You are doing it right." She nodded. She did not ask me again, about anything, for a long time. I thought I had answered her well. I had answered her the way a man answers a question about a cow that is producing milk on schedule. We had 4 children in 7 years. Eli, then Anna, then a stillborn girl we named Esther, because Rebecca asked to name her, even though we had not been told to name the ones who did not breathe. Then John. After Esther, Rebecca did not speak for almost a month. I thought she was being strong. My father said, "She is bearing it well." The bishop said, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes." I repeated those words to her once, when she was kneading dough at 3 in the morning with the kitchen lamp turned low. She looked at me. She did not answer. She kept kneading. I went back to bed. I want to stop here, in the present, and say that I do not know if any man reading this will understand. I had been told what a husband was. I had been told what a husband said. I had not been told that a wife is a person who is dying, sometimes, in small invisible pieces, and that a husband is the one who is supposed to notice. No one told me that. If they had, I might have noticed. The letter on my table opens with the line, "Joseph, I have stayed silent for 46 years because I promised my sister I would. She is gone now, and the promise has outlived its keeper." Miriam was not dead. That is the first thing. In the year before my wedding, when I was 19 and Rebecca was 17, Miriam had been 15. She had been the lively one. Rebecca had been the obedient one. My father and Rebecca's father had arranged the marriage between Rebecca and me at a gathering I was not present for. Miriam writes that Rebecca came home from that gathering and asked her parents if she could be the one to marry instead, the lively sister, the one better suited to a quiet boy. She said this in tears. Her father told her she had been promised. Miriam, who was 15 and unwise, told a friend, and the friend told her mother, and the bishop heard, and within a month Miriam was sent to live with a great aunt in Ohio. The community was told she had died of pneumonia. Even her parents kept the lie, because the alternative was a daughter who had spoken against an arrangement. Rebecca was told her sister was dead. She was told this 2 weeks before our wedding. She walked toward me at the altar believing her sister had been buried. I sat at the kitchen table yesterday, and I felt something in my chest that I have no name for. Not grief exactly. Grief, I know. This was older than grief. This was the understanding that the woman I had married had come to me already broken, and that I had spent 51 years assuming her quietness was her nature, when it was in fact her wound. I want to tell you about the midpoint of our marriage now, because in the dual life I have been living, that is the place where the present and the past meet most sharply. When our son Eli was 22, he came to me one evening behind the woodshed. He was a grown man by then, courting a girl from a neighboring district. He said, "Dot, may I ask you something?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you love ma'am when you married her?" I was surprised by the question. I told him love was not the point of marriage. I told him love came afterward, through faithfulness and provision. I told him what my father had told me. He listened. He nodded. Then he said, very quietly, "Dat, I do not want to be the kind of husband you have been." And he walked away from me in the dusk. I did not speak to my son for almost a year after that. I told myself he was prideful. I told myself he had been corrupted by the world. I told myself many things. What I did not do was ask Rebecca what she thought. She would have told me, I see that now. She would have told me, with her hands folded in her apron, exactly what kind of husband I had been. But I did not ask, because I was afraid, and because in our household a wife was not asked to evaluate her husband, and because I had built my whole life on the idea that I had done what was required. Eli married his girl. He moved 2 counties away. He writes to me twice a year. He visits at Christmas. He has been kind to me, kinder than I deserve, but there is a door between us that I closed myself, and I do not have the key. The kettle is cold now. I have been sitting at the table for a long time. The afternoon light has moved across the floorboards. Miriam's letter is open at the 2nd page. She writes that Rebecca knew her sister was alive. She found out in the 15th year of our marriage. A cousin from Ohio came through on a buggy ride and let it slip, not knowing the secret she was carrying. Rebecca went into the barn and stayed there for 4 hours. I remember that day. I remember coming home from the auction and asking where supper was, and the children saying Ma'am was in the barn, and me going out to the barn and finding her sitting on a milking stool with her hands in her lap. I asked her if she was sick. She said no. I asked her if supper would be ready soon. She said yes, in a moment. I went back to the house. I did not ask her why she had been sitting in the barn for 4 hours. She had been deciding, Miriam writes, whether to write to her sister. She decided not to. She decided that the bishop's word had killed Miriam once, and that to bring her back would only invite the killing again, in some other form. She kept the secret for the next 31 years. She kept it from me. I want to be careful here, because the easy thing would be to say she should have told me. But I sit in this kitchen and I ask myself, honestly, what I would have done if she had. I would have gone to the bishop. I would have asked him about the rule. I would have wanted to know what was permitted. I would not have asked her how she felt. She knew that. She had been married to me for 15 years by then. She knew exactly who I was. The letter continues. Miriam writes that she and Rebecca began a correspondence in our 32nd year of marriage. They wrote through a non-Amish neighbor of Miriam's, a kind woman who would post the letters from a town some distance away, so the return address would not be recognized. Rebecca kept those letters in a tin under the floorboard of the pantry. I never knew about the floorboard. I never knew about the tin. After Rebecca died, my daughter Anna helped me clear out the kitchen, and she found the tin, and she gave it to me without opening it, because she is her mother's daughter, and she understands the weight of other people's silences. The tin has been in my dresser drawer for 11 years. I have never opened it. I am going to open it tonight. Miriam's letter ends with these words. Joseph, I write to you, not to wound you, but because Rebecca asked me, in her last letter, to tell you everything after she was gone. She said she did not want you to learn it all at once. She said you would need time. She also said, and I quote her exactly, that she had loved you in the way a person loves the weather, without expecting it to change for her sake. She wanted you to know that she had not been unhappy every day, only most of them. She wanted you to know that you had been a faithful husband in the way you understood faithfulness. She wanted you to know that she forgave you for the rest. Forgave, Joseph, not excused. I have read that paragraph 9 times. I will read it again tonight, and tomorrow, and for the rest of whatever I have left. The hardest part of being 71 is that the time for becoming a different man has mostly passed. I cannot go back to the morning after our wedding and ask Rebecca if she had slept. I cannot go back to the night Esther was born without breath and sit beside Rebecca on the kitchen floor and weep with her, instead of quoting the bishop. I cannot go back to the 4 hours in the barn and open the door and sit down on the straw beside her and say, tell me. Those moments are closed. They were closed even as they happened, by a younger man who did not know they were the only moments that would matter. But there is a thing I can do, and I am going to do it. I am going to write to my son Eli tonight. I am going to tell him that he was right, behind the woodshed, the year he was 22. I am going to tell him I am sorry I did not speak to him for the year that followed. I am going to tell him that the door between us was built by me, and that I do not know how to open it, but that I would like to try, if he will let me. I am going to tell him about Miriam, and the tin under the pantry floor, and the letter on my table. I am going to tell him that the kind of husband I was is not the kind of husband I would teach my grandsons to be, and that I should have said this 20 years ago. And I am going to write to Miriam. I do not know what I will say to her yet. I owe her an apology for a sentence I did not speak when I was 19, when the bishop announced her death and I did not ask a single question. I should have asked. A boy who had been taught to be kind would have asked. But I had been taught to be a husband. I had been taught to be a son. I had been taught to be a member of the district. I had not been taught to be kind, because kindness, in the place I came from, was a thing a woman did. A man provided. A man corrected. A man led. Kindness was the soft work, and soft work was beneath us, and so we never learned it, and so we married girls who needed it, and we starved them at the table without ever knowing we were the famine. The light is going now. I will eat a small supper. I will open the tin. I will read whatever Rebecca wrote to her sister. in the years when she could not write to me because I had never given her the language for it. I expect it will hurt. I want it to. There is a kind of pain that is the only honest greeting an old man can offer a woman he failed for half a century. I sit here, and I think about the title my own life has worn, the sentence I would put on the gravestone if there were room. I was told to be a husband before I knew how to be kind. That is the whole of it. They handed me a wife before they handed me a heart soft enough to hold her. And I, being obedient, took what was offered, and I did the work I had been shown, and I called it good. And Rebecca, being obedient also, did not tell me otherwise. Outside the orchard is dark, the white stone is invisible until morning. I fold Miriam's letter and place it on top of the seed catalog, and I rise to find the tin. There is a thing I want to say to Rebecca, even though she cannot hear it, and I will say it tonight. Into the room she shared with me for 51 years. I will say, I am sorry I did not ask you, that first morning, if you had slept. It is a small sentence. It is the sentence a kind boy would have spoken. I am not a boy anymore, and the morning is long past, but I am going to speak it anyway. Into the quiet of a kitchen that has been listening for a very long time, waiting for a husband to finally become a man who knew the difference.